The rain came in sideways that Saturday, the kind that soaks through before you've thought to react. I stood in the Harmon County Fairgrounds parking lot at 4:17 p.m. and watched Diane's silver sedan reach the far end of the lot, signal left, and disappear onto the county road. I counted to 3. The taillights were gone. The nearest gas station was 2 miles south, and I knew that because I had driven this stretch every summer with my father. Years before any of this started, years before Diane existed in any version of my life. The pavement around me was dark and pocked with standing water, each puddle shivering at the edges when a gust moved through, and for a moment I stood there doing nothing at all. Not processing, not deciding, just present in the fact of where I was. Something settled low in my sternum. Not panic, not even surprise, something older and quieter than either of those, the sensation of a thing finally becoming what it had always been trying to become. I pulled out my phone. I called Marcus. I said, "Harmon County Fairgrounds, main lot, east entrance." He asked no questions. I heard the truck start. I stood under the aluminum overhang at the edge of the lot and listened to rain knock against the roof above me, a hollow, irregular sound, like someone working without patience. The wind shifted and drove a curtain of it under the overhang and across my shoes. I stepped back against the wall. The folding gate entrance across the lot stood open, the chain hanging loose, and beyond it the county road was empty and gray. The black truck pulled in 11 minutes later. Marcus stepped out, left the engine running, and came around to where I was standing. He was not in uniform, it was a Saturday, but he had the same quality of stillness he always carried, the kind that costs something to maintain. He looked at me once, the way he always did, checking without asking. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. He nodded once and opened the passenger door. I got in. The seat was warm from the heater he'd already had running. I set my bag on the floor between my feet. Neither of us spoke for a minute, and that was the right amount of silence. "Anywhere particular?" he said. "Home," I said. "Crestfield Road." That was the moment I understood what the last 3 years had actually been. Not a gradual misunderstanding, not a family learning its shape, but a campaign with a specific destination, and I had just arrived at it. Act 2. My name is Nora Callahan. I was 29 years old that Saturday, and I worked as a junior property assessor for Delwood County, Ohio, the same county where I had grown up, where my father had raised me, and where he had bought the house on Crestfield Road 22 years before he died. He died in March, 2.5 years before Diane left me in that parking lot. Cardiac event, sudden, no warning anyone could have acted on. I was 26 and I had been living in an apartment across town, and I came home the week of the funeral and I never fully left. There was the house to manage. There was the paperwork. My father had not been organized in the way that protects people, and working through his estate took most of that first year. Evenings at the kitchen table with folders spread out under the overhead light, one category at a time, the kind of work that has no natural stopping point. There was also, if I'm being precise about it, the plain fact that the house on Crestfield Road was the place where I still knew who I was, and I needed that more than I needed the apartment. Diane had been my father's girlfriend for the last 14 months of his life. She was warm, practical, and careful with her words in the way that people are when they have learned that warmth and practicality are effective tools. She had attended the funeral with appropriate grief. She had called me twice in the weeks after to ask how I was holding up, and both times the calls were exactly the right length. Long enough to seem genuine, short enough not to impose. Something in me went quieter after those calls. Not gratitude exactly, but the absence of needing to brace. She began staying at the house about 4 months after my father died. It started as a few nights a week. By the time I noticed the pattern, it had become most nights, and by the time I considered saying something, she had already left a robe on the back of the bathroom door, and a set of good knives in the kitchen drawer, and the social cost of objecting had quietly exceeded what I was willing to pay at a time when everything already cost too much. At a neighbor's gathering on Pellbrook Avenue that fall, the Hendersons, who had known my father for 15 years, Diane referred to the house as our home. She said it in the middle of a sentence about the gutters, something practical and unremarkable, and nobody reacted because why would they? I was standing 6 feet away holding a cup of cider, and I felt the words land somewhere behind my ribs with a small, specific weight. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was imprecise language. People say our when they mean something less formal than ownership. I knew that. I told myself I would watch. I let it pass. I was good at letting things pass that year. The house on Crestfield Road was not in good condition when my father died. Not badly neglected, but the kind of worn that accumulates when one person has been managing alone for a long time. The roof over the back addition had two soft spots my father had been meaning to address. The furnace was original to the house and running on borrowed time. The porch post on the north side had rotted at the base and was being held in place by habit more than anything structural. I took care of it. Not all at once, it spread across 2 winters, but steadily, the way work spreads when you're the only one doing it and you also have a job and a life that runs alongside the house, not inside it. I arranged the roofing contractor, drove the permits through the county office, and paid the difference out of my own account when my father's insurance disbursement fell short. The furnace I researched for 6 weeks before pulling the trigger on a replacement unit. Not the cheapest option, not the most expensive, the one that would last. The porch post I rebuilt myself on 2 successive weekends in October, with a neighbor's help for the lifting, using treated lumber I'd hauled in my own car. What I want to say clearly, and I'm choosing my words because this matters, is that none of this felt exceptional to me at the time. It was my father's house. These were things that needed doing. I did not keep a log or a tally or a record of hours. I did not think of it as contribution in any formal sense. I thought of it as maintenance. I thought of it as what you do. Sometime in that second winter, after the furnace was in, after the porch post was solid, I started keeping a file. Not because I thought I would need it. Because I work with property records for a living, and the part of my brain that understands documents recognized something that the rest of me was still trying not to name. I printed the deed. I printed the transfer record. I printed every tax receipt I had filed under my name. I put them in an accordion file in the spare room and I did not look at it again for months. Diane thought of the house differently. Or rather, Diane did not think of the repairs at all in the way I've just described, because acknowledging them would have complicated the story she was building, which was a story in which the house was becoming hers through the simple accumulation of presents. She bought curtains. She rearranged the living room furniture. She subscribed to a local magazine and had it delivered to the Crestfield Road address, and when it arrived, she left it on the kitchen counter with her name on the label facing up. None of it was hostile. That was what made it effective. Every individual thing was reasonable. A person living in a house buys curtains. A person buys magazine subscriptions. A person says our home because they live there and language is approximate. Each piece, taken alone, was nothing. Taken together, assembled quietly over 18 months, it was a claim. The drive to the Harmon County Fairgrounds, the one she told me was a trip to run an errand on Pembroke Avenue, a quick stop, we'll be back before dinner, happened on the 3rd Saturday of November. I had no reason to question it. I had been a passenger in cars with Diane a dozen times without incident. I brought my bag because she said we might stop for groceries on the way home. I remember the bag sitting on the back seat, tipped sideways, a library book sliding out of it as she took the on-ramp. We had been on the road for about 20 minutes when Diane brought it up. She did it the way she did most things, conversationally, smoothly, as though the subject had simply occurred to her. "I've been thinking," she said, "that you might be happier somewhere of your own." I looked at the road ahead. "I'm fine where I am," I said. "Of course you are," she replied. "But there's a difference between fine and settled, don't you think? You're 29. You should have a space that's really yours." "The house is partly mine," I said. I kept my voice level. She made a small sound, not quite a laugh, more the sound of someone setting down a fragile object carefully. "Nora, your father and I were together for over a year. I was part of that household." "He didn't leave you the house, Diane." She didn't answer immediately. We passed the Pembroke Avenue turnoff without slowing. I noticed, but I didn't say anything yet. I watched the intersection recede in the side mirror. The road ahead was straight and open, the fields on either side already flat and colorless in November, and I kept my hands in my lap. "You've been through a hard time," she said, after a moment. "I understand that. But I think sometimes you hold on to things because letting go feels like losing him. And that's not healthy." The words were gentle. The structure of them was a door being closed from the outside. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You passed Pellbrook." "There's something I want to show you first," she said. She pulled off the county road into the Harmon County Fairgrounds lot. It was empty in November, the season long over, the vendor stalls boarded shut. She drove to the center of the lot and stopped the car. The engine ran. Rain had started, light but steady, streaking the windshield in long diagonals. "I need you to hear me clearly," she said. She had both hands on the wheel and she was looking straight ahead. "It's time for you to find your own place. I've given this a lot of thought." "This is my father's house," I said. "It's complicated," she replied. "Legally it may be. But practically, emotionally, Nora, you being there is making it impossible for me to move forward. You have to see that." "I'm not leaving," I said. She nodded, as though I'd said something she had anticipated. Then she unlocked the doors and said, "I think some time to reflect will help you." I looked at her. "You're not serious." "I'm very serious," she said. "This is for your own good. You're being ungrateful for everything I've tried to do, for the patience I've shown. I've given you more than enough time." Something went cold across my shoulders. Not fear, not disbelief. Something more like the sensation of a floor becoming permanent ground, solid in a way it hadn't been a second before. I got out of the car. The rain hit my jacket immediately. She rolled down the window. "Take some time," she said. "Think about what's practical." Then the window went up. I stood back. I watched her turn the car around, slow and careful, the way she did everything. The silver sedan moved toward the lot exit. The right turn signal came on. She merged onto the county road without looking back. The sound of the rain filled the silence where the engine had been. I stood still and let it. I stepped under the aluminum overhang at the east edge of the lot. I opened my phone. I found Marcus's number and called it. I listened to it ring twice. I said the address. I put the phone back in my pocket. I looked at the empty lot, the boarded stalls, the folding gate entrance, a paper cup moving sideways across the pavement in the wind. I shifted my bag to my other shoulder. I checked the time, 4:17 p.m. I watched a truck enter the county road from the south, moving fast and pass without slowing. I put my back against the overhang post. I waited. The black truck turned into the lot 11 minutes later. I walked toward it. Marcus came around to my side, left the engine running. I told him I needed to go home. He opened the door. I got in. We drove back toward Delwood and I watched the rain work against the passenger window, the water finding the same low paths on the glass every time, the way water does. The house appeared at the end of Crestfield Road with its lights off. I had left a lamp on in the front room that morning. Diane had turned it off before she left. I noticed that, and I kept noticing it all the way up the front walk. Inside, I left my jacket on the hook by the door. The hook my father had installed, a cast iron curve he'd found at an estate sale in 2003, and mounted himself into the plaster, which was not the simple job it looked like. And I went directly to the filing cabinet in the spare room. I reached in past the hanging folders to the accordion file at the back, the one I'd put together 18 months ago when I first started to feel the shape of what Diane was doing. I took it out. It was heavier than it looked. Property records, tax receipts, the original deed with my father's signature in blue ballpoint, the county transfer documents I'd filed after the estate cleared. All of it printed, dated, organized the way I organize things at work, because this was, in the end, the work I knew. I carried it to the kitchen table. I set it down. I pulled out the chair and sat with it in front of me for a moment. Outside, the rain had settled into a slower rhythm. I could hear it against the window glass, and I could hear the gutters on the north side working, the ones I had repitched 2 years ago because my father hadn't gotten to that either. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the Delwood County Property Portal, the same system I used 5 days a week, and I logged in with my assessor credentials. The record for 4114 Crestfield Road came up in 4 seconds. Owner of record, Nora M. Callahan. Transfer date. Prior owner, Gerald T. Callahan. The tax payments, current and uninterrupted, all under my name. I'd been paying them directly for 2 years. The property was assessed at $683,500, a number I'd arrived at myself as part of a routine district reassessment 8 months prior, which was an uncomfortable piece of the record and also an airtight one. I turned the laptop so the screen faced the kitchen doorway. I laid it flat and open on the table, next to the accordion file, next to the deed. And then I sat down and waited. Diane came through the front door 40 minutes later. I heard her set her keys on the entry table, a habit, always the same sound, and then her footsteps moved toward the kitchen and stopped. She stood in the doorway. She saw the table. "What is this?" she asked. "Sit down," I said. "Please." She didn't sit. She stayed in the doorway, and something moved across her face that wasn't quite calculation and wasn't quite surprise. "I want to talk about what happened today," I said. "I think you're being very dramatic," she said. "You drove me to an empty parking lot in November and left me there," I said. "I gave you space to think. That's not the same thing." "You told me I was being ungrateful," I said, "for the patience you'd shown." She straightened slightly. "You have been difficult, Nora. I've tried to be understanding." "Tell me what you think you own," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Then, I lived in this house. I contributed to it." "In what way?" "Emotionally. Practically. I was your father's partner." "For 14 months, I said. "That's not." "And then he died," I said, "and the house transferred to me. Through his estate. Legally and completely. I paid the filing costs, $14,260, if you want the number. I've paid every tax bill since. I repaired the roof. I replaced the furnace. I rebuilt the porch post." I touched the edge of the laptop screen and turned it slightly toward her. "This is the county record. You can read the owner line from there." She looked at the screen. Her hands were at her sides. "You can't make me leave," she said. Her voice had gone flatter. The warmth was still technically there, but it was thinner now, stretched over something harder. I said nothing. I let that land. "I'm not making you do anything," I said. "I'm showing you what's true. You told me I needed a lesson today. You left me 36 miles from home in the rain because you thought it would clarify things for me." I paused. "It did." "This is ungrateful," she said. The word came out differently this time, not as a strategic tool, but as something she actually believed, which was the more interesting version of it. "After everything. You told me I was ungrateful for your patience," I said. "I want you to understand that patience is not the same as ownership. And presence is not the same as right." She looked at me. I looked back. "I'll need you to have your things out by the end of the month," I said. "That's 30 days. That's more than enough." She said nothing. I closed the laptop. I straightened the accordion file. I did not look away from her until she turned and walked out of the kitchen. The house was quiet after that. Outside, the rain had slowed to something barely there, a sound more than a thing, just the gutters draining, working the way they were supposed to. 4 months later, I was on the front porch on a Saturday morning with a small brush and a jar of exterior paint. White, the same shade my father had used, which I'd matched at the hardware store by bringing in a chip of the old board. The address placard he'd made the week he bought the house was still nailed to the porch post. It was pine, hand-painted, the letters gone rough at the edges from 22 winters. The wood had warped slightly and one corner had lifted, and I'd been meaning to reattach it and touch up the letters since the fall. I worked slowly, steadying the board with one hand while I painted with the other, retracing each number the way he'd first put it there. The morning was cold enough that I could see my breath, and the paint took longer to set than it would have in warmer air, so I had to hold the board flat and still until the first coat stopped moving. The wood smelled like itself, old resin, weathered grain, and my fingertips kept finding the raised surface along the bottom edge, the place where the paint had built up in layers over the years, each coat a different season. I thought about how you can tell the order of things if you look closely enough. Which layer came first, which repair was made over which previous one, the way that history accumulates in objects if you let them stay. Diane called in February. She left a voicemail, 3 minutes and 40 seconds, which I know because the counter was visible on the screen when I saw the notification. She said she wanted to talk. She said she thought we had gotten off on the wrong foot. She said there might be a way to come to an arrangement that worked for everyone involved. I listened to it once while I was standing in the kitchen, then I set the phone down on the counter and went back to what I'd been doing. I didn't return the call. The house was mine. It had been mine before that Saturday in November, and it remained mine after it, and the clearest thing Diane's lesson taught me, the part she hadn't meant to teach, was that I had never fully understood the weight of what I was standing on until someone tried to move me off it. The repairs I made after that were smaller ones. A screen door hinge, a light fixture in the upstairs hall, the kind of work that accumulates quietly when a house is actually cared for rather than competed over. If any of this sounds familiar to you, if you've ever stood in a room holding something that was yours while someone calmly explained why it wasn't, I think you know how the rest of this goes. And if this story stayed with you, pass it to someone who needs it. I set the brush down on the rim of the paint jar. I pressed the corner of the placard back against the post until I heard it seat. My father's handwriting was under my own now, the first letters still legible beneath the new coat, and I left it that way. Some things are better layered than erased.